thank you for the question. Our schools across this state are incredibly important to our communities. They are the vessels in which our children spend a large proportion of their time throughout their childhood. And as they do, it is critical, and we have learned in this state, that if we make an investment in making sure that they are not just getting rote memorization or learning how to think critically, but in fact have access to a wide variety of services, that we are able to identify early problems, and we are then able to prevent them and save us incredible amounts of money in the long term. This was most highlighted in the world of child abuse, and that was the place where Vermont went way, way out ahead of the rest of the country and was able to identify those problems early on by simply having a caseworker who would know to ask the right questions and find out the answers. The same is true in mental health. We need to make sure that we are talking with the mental health providers, including the community-based as well as others, in combination with those school systems to make sure that we are doing everything we can to integrate those programs together, to not make them segregated in this part of the school and these folks are in that part of the school, but are a part of the whole, so that we can maximize the impact of those resources that we are investing. We're investing tax dollars in both. We shouldn't be looking at them as individual entities, but in fact the best ways to get the most.
And we're asking our schools to do things that a generation before we didn't ask our schools to do. And providing mental health services to our young people is part of it. But we also need to think about what our goal is as Vermonters, as a society. And for me, the goal is wraparound services. We want to think, we recognize that when there is a mental health issue with a kid in a school, that it affects a whole family. And that maybe there are other problems as well. Maybe there's drug problems, substance abuse problems, maybe there's problems with poverty or access to food. The kid comes to school hungry. And I think we just need to be frank and say, yep, we are asking different things from our schools than just pure education. Of course, it's all related. A kid can't learn if they come to school hungry. A kid can't learn if they've got a mental health issue that's undiagnosed and untreated. And truly, there are a lot of kids in our schools today with mental health issues that are undiagnosed and untreated. And that affects their ability to learn and other kids' ability within the classroom. When we have discussions about how we're using our resources, and there's a lot of conversations right now about education funding, and they're tough conversations because the property tax feels really burdensome for most Vermonters. We need to be frank about what we're asking our schools to do. And as governor, I'm going to take that into account. When we look at the future, it's how do we link our schools with our community mental health centers? How do we link our community mental health centers with the other service providers in the area that are all working with the kids in our school?
John, thank you. And I'm glad you asked that as a long-range issue and not how we're going to solve it in the first year of the next administration. Two answers to it. One, I think you start with honesty and budgeting. And what I've seen happen in recent years is more and more responsibilities have been shifted to our schools because we're underfunding what needs to be done in mental health and in other arenas. And then state government turns around and blames our schools for excessive spending. And I think that's got to stop. State, I think, has to pay for the services that we're expecting to be provided, whether it's in schools or in other settings. The second one is definitely a long-term issue in terms of what I believe can be done, and that's prevention. And when I talk to folks in schools, and John, you know this because you and I have talked about it, there are more and more children showing up at the earliest ages, the earliest grades, who have behavioral and emotional problems. And we have to ask ourselves as a society, why is that happening? What is going on in our families that is preventable? And I believe a lot of those issues are preventable if we have good early childhood programs in the state of Vermont. That every child, whether that child's in a family setting where mom or dad's staying home, or whether that child's in a child care setting, every child should be able to get off to a good start. And we neglect that part of our society at our peril, and we end up with higher costs in our schools as a result of it. I'm a strong believer in prevention. I think we have to take that on very directly, and we have to recognize that it takes an investment up front because you don't see the results of it, you don't see the benefits of it for a number of years. But a lot of the problems we're facing as a state require us to take a long-term view of solutions. We didn't get into these problems overnight. We aren't going to get out of them overnight. But if we only plan for 2-year election cycles, we're never going to take on those sorts of issues.
Senator. John Everett's question is one of probably 100 that you could think of in this room that points out why and how we haven't achieved mental health parity. I was one of the sponsors of the mental health parity bill. I was one of the people that took on Magellan when they were trying to stand in the way of mental health parity. But here's the point. Imagine that we had adolescents in our school systems who were suffering from cancer. And we said, well, we don't have the money to treat you. Imagine that we had school kids in the school system who had strep throat. And we said, well, we don't have the ability to treat you right now. The point is, could there be a starker example of of the lack of achieving mental health parity than John's question? If you have students, which we know we do, that need mental health therapy and treatment, by putting it off, by not funding the resources needed, it is no different than not taking care of any other health care need that we all have to have served. So I think the answer to your question, John, as governor is, first of all, I'm going to end the war of words against our children, against our school board members, against our hardworking educators. And secondly, I'm going to work collaboratively through a budget process to do the things I outlined. Move money where we're spending now from prisons and put it into preventative care, certainly in our schools. What happens when we don't treat adolescents in our schools or kids in our schools? They inevitably have to go into crisis to get treatment. This is the only health care need left in Vermont where we require you to go into crisis to get treatment. It's wrong, and I will...
John, you stated that you were concerned about a disproportionate share as we cut back on mental health services. I will tell you that I believe schools and the property tax have been paying a disproportionate share of special education for many years. The schools, for obvious reasons, because that's where the children are, have become the deep pockets of human services. I had conversations with Howard Dean and I've talked with Jim Douglas, and here's what I would propose that we do. We need to have everybody together and we need a list of what's mandated for special education. Then we need a list of all the medical services. Then what we have in between is this tremendous gray field of emotional, mental health, substance abuse, a variety of issues that it's absolutely, you've got the kids and access to the families in their schools, a great place to be an entree into the family to help the whole family deal with the issues. Wrong to have the property tax pay for it. General fund dollars need to be directed, and the only way we're going to figure out what's what is by having this list of here are the different services and deciding what we're going to do. Is that going to put more pressure on the general fund? Yes. Is that okay? Yes. Because at least in the general fund, we have options as to where we spend the money, how we spend the money, and if we want to raise more money. People don't with schools and their property taxes. You don't have any choices. So what we're going through right now, our services are being taken away from all kinds of kids, not just kids with special needs, because there's so much pressure on our school budgets. As governor, I'll come up with this list with folks. We will change it, and we will really hammer the federal government to pay their 40%, which would help everybody tremendously.